Vidisha, Pro-Vice Chancellor and Professor, Department of Economics, University of Dhaka. As our discussant, we have Dr. Isha Jahan Khan, Associate Professor, Department of Women and Gender Studies, University of Dhaka with us. In this session, we have 4 papers. 2 of them are online. The papers are going to be presented by Ms. Nabila Hassan, Dr. Adnan M.S. Fakir, Ms. Shomi Bose, and Ms. Mahzabin Mahbub. I hope that we have a very engaging session. With this, I'd like to hand over the session to the chair.
Thank you. A very good afternoon and welcome you all to this very important session. Let me first thank Sanim for organizing this session because what we have seen that gender and the related issues of economics, these are often not considered as a mainstream discussion, and we often find that we don't see much of the discussion in the policy discourse. But it is, I think, extremely important, and we all know that over time, the importance of integrating gender into the mainstream economics and mainstream agenda, policy agenda, that has become very important. From that point of view, it is very, I think it's very appreciable for Sanem to organize this session so that we can actually discuss about various aspects which is closely related to the economic aspects of women and the challenges and the women face in South Asian countries and other parts of the world, and the opportunities that they have as well. So with this, I think I would like to start the session and handing it over to the presenters. So the first presenters that we have is Ms. Nabila Hassan. So Ms. Nabila Hassan, she will have around 10 minutes of time. So over to you, Nabila.
Thank you, ma'am. Assalamu alaikum to everyone. So my name is Nabila Hassan. Yeah. So hello everyone. So my name is Nabila Hassan. I'm a PhD candidate at the University of Manchester, UK, currently in my final year. So this paper is a kind of a first at its very initial stage. It's jointly done with my main supervisors, Dr. Johan Olikop and Dr. Upasak Das. So the title of my paper is Temperature Anomalies, Women's Economic Empowerment and Mediating Role of Female Labor Force Participation in Bangladesh. And it's a part of my thesis. This is the 3rd chapter, like a second empirical chapter and 3rd and final chapter of my thesis. And it's broadly about how like climate stress, women's work, economic empowerment in the rural Bangladesh is related, and kind of it also delves into deeper about this kind of heterogeneous effect of female labor force participation that might be within their relationship between this climate stress and women's economic empowerment. And I would say for the motivation for this paper came to me because I think rural women maybe like for almost in most of the developing countries work twice. They work in markets and at home, exactly while climate stress makes both of them harder. Okay. It's not working. Someone, could you please? Yeah, thank you. So I'll start by saying that temperature anomalies shift both actually economic triggers to women's work and conversion factors like which translates resources into freedoms. Okay, let's start again. So rising temperature anomalies are increasingly recognized as productivity and welfare shocks, especially in agrarian economics of the global south. Yet the gendered impact of these consequences are not fully understood. Like, does climate stress erode women's agency, or do women's economic roles provide resilience? So Bangladesh has a high exposure setting with intense rural labor markets and persistent constraints on women mobility and time allocations, which means like increased contribution through unpaid family labor. So that's the kind of highlighting point here. This study examines, so our paper examines whether women's like famous labor force participation, FLFP, mediates the causal relationship between temperature-induced climate stress, anomalies from historical, which is like I'm broadly speaking, anomalies from historical temperature, like the long-term average, and women's economic empowerment through in our BHS data. I will just tell you in a minute. Empowerment through women's empowerment in agriculture index, WEI data, and women's status modules from Bangladesh Integrated Household Survey, BIHS, from International Food and Policy Research Institute, IFPRI, for rural Bangladesh. So it has 3 rounds. So it is panel data for 2011-12, 15-16, and 18-19. So we bring our uniquely this rich empowerment measurement based on BHS WE and women status modules to this climate labor question. So that's the motivation. Somehow, yeah, thank you. So for literature review, I will just go very briefly. So climate and economic performance and non-linear temperature impacts on output. Could you please see, there is a spot here because adaptation, I cannot see this line. Okay, thank you. So climate economic performance, which is like non-linear temperature impacts on output, productivity, and lipid adaptation. So gender and labor. So the link here is climate stress changes labor supply or time allocation, often with differential impacts by gender and sector. And empowerment and development, that side, that the third strand. Women's empowerment is both an input and an outcome of development, which is it constraints and institutions matter. So constraints on that empowerment and institutions where they're living, like the country, they matter. And the gap, as we find, like there are limited causal evidence linking temperature anomalies to women's economic empowerment in the empirical literature, current empirical literature, and testing whether the effect differs by women's labor market participation. So our paper connects these trends by estimating how union level temperature anomaly intensify affects a harmonized multi-round measure of women's economic empowerment, and by testing whether women's labor force participation conditions the empowerment impact through the interaction between this climate stress and the FLFP. So as we said, like this FLFP works as a mediating factor or has heterogeneous effect. Okay, so our main research question is, how do unexpected temperature anomalies affect women's economic empowerment, and does women's labor force participation amplify or buffer that effect? So I would just quickly go through the data gap. Like most climate gender studies rely on force empowerment proxies. BHS provides the measures in the mentioned modules, like production, resources, these domains, income, leadership, and time, plus women's status measures in the Z1 module, or in all 3 rounds. So there is a data gap. Methodological gap, the existing literature often estimates average effects on labor outcomes. We focus on agency as the outcome and explicitly test heterogeneity by women's participation using the interaction term. Details are in the methodology section. And the conceptual gap is we embed this empowerment in sense capability approach, Amartya sense capability approach, distinguishing functionings from capabilities, like what freedom to choose, the capability 3-dimension, freedom to choose, control resources, and mobility and voice. So this research question relates directly to a policy relevant question left open by the literature, whether expanding women's economic activity under climate stress strengthens resilience in agency via income and outside options, or instead amplifies empowerment losses like time poverty, constraints, and climate stress penalties. So we see empowerment is not only a means of development, but an end, like it's a capability expansion for women. Okay. So my theory of change, my theoretical model is based on multi-science capability approach. So I would not go to the details, like just key concepts in the sense model, like functionings, capabilities, agency, freedom, and conversion factors. And the mechanism map is like if there is climate stress, their impact on women's capabilities and agency, like the hour dependent variable. So there is a within variation because of the FLFP, which works as a conversion factor, which has impact over like returns to work, like their productivity or wages, time or care burden, which is like the unpaid family labor, mobility, safety, and social norms, like the patriarchal norms. So for the outcome, it's like women's economic empowerment because it's both captures the capability and agency aspect of sense approach using the WEI domains and women's status. So I would not read loudly about the economic part, but I would say like climate stress affects empowerment directly and differentially or heterogeneously for working women via our interactive factor. So data, I would not say in very much detail, I think. So like it's like 3 rounds and how my variables are constructed. And those 5 domains of like production decision, productive capital, income control, leadership, time allocation in WEI, which are complemented by women's status measures. And that's why I'm calling it a harmonized kind of FLFP. So all components are coded as higher values indicating greater agency. That means if your value is 1, you have lower agency, and it's 5, you have more agency and upper kind of ladder, and aggregated using within route standardization and equal weight averaging, and pooled and re-standardized for interpretably. And I would say why this measure matters, because this way separates working more from being able to choose and benefit from work. Like that's precisely that distincts the capability approach, what the capability approach emphasizes. So climate stress measures. So this is kind of I'm calculating the temperature anomalies within Bangladesh at a union level, and its source is like a from an online data source from the Climate Research Unit, and it basically the annual temperature data from 1980 to 2019. So what I did, I estimated an union specific temperature trend using this data, and then predicted expected temperature for the survey rounds, like lag rounds, 2010 to 2019. And I computed deviations, and then I squared the deviations and normalized by union specific variability to form a comparable anomaly intensity index. So by dividing by standard deviation, so we assign Z that uses our baseline, uses the lag Z to each of the BHS round to ensure that exposure precedes empowerment outcomes. So for now, I have calculated for just the Z scores, not the lag ones, which we do in the future of the improvement of the paper. So this Z captures how unusual a year's temperature is relative to what the union is adapted to, aligning with the shock with behavioral responses. So this is my 2-stage framework. So first stage, I am running the regression for union at a union level with the union fixed effect with climate stress and the relationship between female labor force participation. And in the second stage, I am trying to find out the relationship between this empowerment and this climate stress and their interacting factor and with other controls. So EMP, this one is harmonized WEI-based indexed, and the Z is union and temperature anomaly index, and the interaction is a climate anomaly and female labor force perception interaction, and the other were like some household kind of household controls. And we use the union fixed effect, and we will use survey round fixed effects. And we standardize the standard errors, clustered them at union level. So for interpretation, beta one, we here beta one is like the effect of climate stress from non-working women when FLFP is double equals to 0. Beta one plus beta two is effect of for working women when, which is like FLFP is 1, and it's beta 2 is, I think, the central for this paper, this coefficient, because whether women's work buffers, if it's positive it buffers, or if it's negative it amplifies empowerment loss under climate stress. So we are trying to find whether it buffers or amplifies it. So these are some preliminary regression results. So for the specification 1, I got kind of the 6.3, 6.1. So this is the table. So I'm going to just describe them. So for one non-working woman, climate stress is positively associated with women's empowerment among non-working women. The coefficient is significant, which is 6.361%. So Holden union fixed effects constant, higher temperature stress correlates with higher measured empowerment for women, not in the labor force. Why? Climate stress may shift intra-household coping responsibilities toward women, like managing budgets, food or security decisions, increasing measured like agency on some way domains, like even if overall welfare may be deteriorating, their burden increases, like their unpaid family labor increases. So in specification 2, it's basically telling you like participant versus non-participants, the results comparison with the interaction. So the baseline effect is a pretty big, but I think I will have to tweak with some unsorization or of the data. This is the effect of temperature anomalies when when is not in the working force after controlling for the female labor force participation and the interaction. So this main effect is 0.730%. So on average, women who participate in the labor force have higher empowerment, consistent with the idea that market increments strengthens outside options and bargaining power. And the interaction term, it's a negative significant, so 0.3831. So that means that climate stress is less empowering or more damaging for women who work than for the women who do not. So women's labor market participation appears to amplify exposure to climate stress rather than fully buffering it. So it is a bit contradictory from our previous assumption, but I would say the policy relevance is here. Work is empowering on average, like positive FLFP, we found it, but working women are more vulnerable to heat stress or like climate stress because there's a negative interaction. That pattern is consistent with the double burden mechanism that I explained in my term of theory of change. So climate stress increases household coping demands and domestic workload and reduces productivity or returns in heat exposed work or climate stressed work. So working women face both time poverty and higher stress costs. So our contribution, like a capability-based interpretation of empowerment under climate stress. So not only whether women work, but whether they can convert work into valued freedoms. So this might be an indication of a new evidence for Bangladesh using this BHS data. And with the rich empowerment measurement and union level anomaly shocks. And this directly tests whether the FLFP female labor force participant is protective, like workers' resilience, or risky amplification for agency under climate stress. So I would say for some actionable policy implications, so we have to protect women's capabilities from climate stress, like for adaptation and risk management, like childcare facilities for working females or time-saving infrastructure like green infrastructure, make women's work decent and climate resilient, like labor protection, empowerment focused program design in the social protection programs, reduce time poverty. That means they are overburdened with both work at home and outside. So the binding convention constraint, like childcare facilities for working females. So I repeat it here. So I'd say climate adaptation needs to be gender responsive, not only by promoting women's work, but by reducing heat exposure and like climate stress and temperature anomalies and time constraints, like you have to think about safe transportation for them, affordable child care facilities, or water access, or flexible work designs for like whether they can have a kind of more time for maybe themselves. Okay. Thank you all for listening. Any comments or questions?
Thank you, Ms. Nabila. It was a wonderful presentation, and as you pointed out, that the impact of climate change, it's not only often we forget that there is a gender impact as well, and thanks for pointing it out and with appropriate econometrics too. So now, from climate adaptation and climate change, we will shift to a little bit of different topic. The topic is the impact of media coverage of sexual violence on women's work decision in rural Bangladesh. And the paper will be presented by Dr. Adnan M.S. Fakir, and he will be connected online. So I think Dr. Adnan.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah, sure. Okay, over to you.
Thank you very much. I'll quickly share my screen. Great. Thank you very much for having me here. My name is Adnan Fakir. I'm an associate professor at the University of Sussex. And this is joint work with Tushar Bharati, who's in the University of Western Australia, and with Ashraf, who's in Dalhousie in Canada. Just wanted to point out that from the time when we submitted the paper till now, thankfully the paper has been published in the Journal of Population Economics just last month. So an invitation for you guys to check out the paper if you guys are interested in this topic. But at the same time, we are working on similar topics, so feedback will be much appreciated. I'll quickly go over motivation because I think we all are familiar with this. There is an increasing number of literature that looks at how safety concerns impact labor force participation and act as a barrier. Number of recent studies, for example, Girja Borkar's study looked into how reporting of sexual and physical violence affects college choices in India. More recently, Mukherjee published a paper that looked at how fertility preferences, in particular son preferences, is also impacted, also in India. There are two papers that are very similar to what we have done here, and those are both from Siddiqui. So this is Zara Siddiqui from Pakistan, as well as Chakraborty's paper that do explore how reporting of sexual and physical violence impacts labor force participation, but they explore urban India and they don't find any effect in rural India in that case. Having said that, majority of the existing studies seem to, at least South Asian studies, mainly come from urban India, and which is why we were interested to see how that affects rural Bangladesh as well. Now, of course, how media reports of sexual violence affects the victims can operate both ways. One is it can increase fear of public spaces, stigmatization is increased, anxiety and perceived vulnerability goes up. But at the same time, theoretically, purely from a theoretical perspective, media reporting should also increase awareness. It may also reduce stigma by finding more solidarity, and at the same time should be able to increase public pressure and institutional responses. So theoretically, it can go either way. So it really boils down to becoming an empirical question. So the research question is fairly straightforward. How do media reports of sexual violence affect a woman's work decisions in rural Bangladesh? And do women change their type of employment, maybe from work for pay to unpaid work? That is something we do explore. Is there a change in safety behavior that is consistent with this particular pattern? These are the areas that we mainly explore here. Very similar to Nabila, the data we use comes from the BIHS. We use the second and the third rounds of the BIHS, and we create a balanced sample from those two rounds of roughly 5,600 households. The violence data comes from the Bangladesh Peace Observatory, which essentially is very similar to the UCLID dataset, and they collect newspaper articles on a daily basis from 23 news outlets. They geocode the incidents at the Upazila levels, and we know the exact date when it happened. But one of the reasons why we use BPO over UCLID is BPO categorizes based on sexual violence and gender-based violence categories, which we utilize. And then, of course, the BIHS and BPO are matched based on the survey date and their Upazila location and exact date, of course. So, how do we measure female labor force participation? So in the BIHS, they ask the respondents in terms of their employment outcomes in the last 7 days. And we can use two variables essentially to categorize three key outcomes. One is work for pay, if they're involved in any income generating work in the past 7 days. Self-employment, this is basically own account but income generating activities such as livestock and poultry, which dominate the sample. But then we also have work without pay, which is typically some kind of entrepreneurial activity, or like typically family businesses or apprenticeship that does not provide any earnings. In terms of definition, it's important to note that work without pay excludes household work. We do not use that as a formal definition, which of course other papers have explored. In terms of the media reported violence, we use the classical definition from BPO. Sexual assaults is defined as one-sided sexual violence, such as rape or attempted rape by an individual or small group against another individual or small group. But we, of course, focus on the cases where the victims are individuals. We do know who, in a lot of the cases, we know the gender of the victim as well as the perpetrator, which we utilize. I'll skip the sample description going into depth about it, but just wanted to highlight two things. There is massive gender inequality, as we all expect and know. But at the same time, in terms of the VAW dataset, between 2004, the dataset recorded 7,653 VAW incidents, of which about 41% were categorized as sexual assaults. So just looking at the spatial variation within that data set. So here I'm just pointing it out. Dhaka, of course, has the highest amount of reporting, followed by, interestingly, Narayanganj and Chittagong and Mymensingh, but that's a separate discussion. The empirical strategy is very straightforward. So we have our outcomes, and then we aggregate sexual violence or other types of VAW over the past month. We have individual fixed effects, sub-district times quarter fixed effects, as well as year fixed effects. And each of those fixed effects control for factors we are interested in and expect them to really. However, based on the empirical strategy, it is important to note that village-specific time-varying factors that are correlated with lagged reports of VAW or labor supply could still potentially bias the results. So the results are not entirely causal based on this identification strategy. However, we do report a number of robustness and sanity checks to say that biasness is likely to be low, including some Bartik type instruments, police repeated VAW, as well as past placebo checks. One of the comments we had gotten from a remover is that after such restrictive fixed effects, do we have enough variation coming from? So here I'm just plotting the residuals to show what variation really explains the outcome variables that we're using. But I'll jump straight into the result because I'm conscious of time. So the first result is that, yes, there is some effect of sexual violence in terms of employment for females. And this is mainly driven by a substitution that happens from self-employment to work without pay. And that's kind of what column 6 is highlighting here. So there is the shift from self-employment to unpaid work, and the magnitude we find is that one standard deviation increase in media reported sexual assaults leads to about 3.8 to 4.4% decline in work for pay. However, as you know, that the measure we use just falls on the past 7 days. And so that might say that this is not likely a long-term change. So we explore associations with income as well as consumption. And we do see that sexual reporting falls, reduces income by, for female income specifically by a fairly large share. The same thing happens consumption, but in mostly female-specific categories, such as expenditure behind female cosmetics or children's education. In fact, we do find a large fall in coaching due to this exposure. So then the next question is, why do women substitute away from these self-employment unpaid work? And we hypothesize that this is mainly being driven by the fear of victimization, especially for females who have a greater exposure to outside interactions. So do we observe any change in safety behavior? And this is where we explore responses by both the female and the male respondents. And we do find that female respondents report that females take precautions for safety measures more in more exposed regions. And this specific definition is whether women in the family go out with a companion, are not allowed to go out in the evenings or to roam around here and there during the day. We do not find in terms of head covering any significant effects. Male respondents' changes are not significant either. One of the advantages of the BPO is that the incidents report who the perpetrators are if it's reported. So we use that to identify sexual assaults by political or government officials, and we find that that seems to be driving a lot of that substitution effect that we see. We can also categorize it by different types of sexual assault. So we group it into 4 different categories here: lethal, group, brutal. So lethal is if someone had died, group is if it was a group attack, brutal if there was torture involved. And it seems to be that the group sexual assaults impact majority or drive majority of the impact. I know I'm out of time, so I'll quickly conclude here. So the key takeaways here is that the sexual assaults do affect rural women's work decisions, and at least in Bangladesh. And it seems to be a meaningful effect because we do see a large income in females' income, and it's consistent with the fear channel. There's increased safety precautions and stronger effects for severe and high-profile incidents. The highlights in media salience in shaping economic behavior is a key outcome that we do find. And of course, if you want to improve women's economic outcomes, it does require addressing at least their perceived sense of safety if you want to improve that. I'll stop here. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Fakir. It was, as we already said, that this is a fundamental issue. Because we often, it is rather unfortunate, I would say, that we often talk about and we often haven't been able to accomplish some of the very fundamental facts and fundamental issues that we have been discussing about. One of the safety and security of women. And from that point of view, I think it's a very important and very crucial policy issue that is related to this paper. So I'm sure the discussion will shed further light on it. So with that, we are going to the third paper. The third paper is by Ms. Shomi Bosch, and she will be talking about digital age effect of internet on women-owned small businesses. So, Ms. Shomi, are you online? Yes. Okay, over to you.
Hello, everyone. Am I audible?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Let me share the slides.
Ms. Shomi, I think if you switch off your video, then that will be better.
I think
there is some connection issue.
Okay, ma'am, sure. I'm not able to share it. Just a moment. Uh, it's not.
Miss Shomi, can you connect?
No, ma'am. Actually, I'm not able to. It's not working.
Is there, we can share from here and then you can present.
Uh, one
So,
second. I mean, just my screen has gone all.
Can you share your screen with us?
Yeah, that's what I'm trying for, but my screen has gone all frozen here.
Do you have a
In that case, I'm just তোমাদের কাছে যদি থাকে তোমরা এখান থেকে share.
She did not share her email presentation.
I have sent the presentation.
Okay.
I have sent it in the morning actually.
Morning. Okay.
Actually, my laptop screen got all frozen here.
Is this a? It's not her.
In that case, shall we go to another presentation and then we can come back later to her?
Yeah.
That is another option.
Yeah.
I think Ms. Shomi is having some problem with the connection. What we can do that we can hear the other presentation and then we can share the screen from this side and Ms. Shomi can present. I think that will save some time. So sorry, Ms. Shomi. So we will get back to you soon. Now we
Sure.
are going to hear from Ms. Mahjabin Mehboob. Ms. Mahjabin Mehboob will be talking about the changing causal impact of maternal employment and child nutrition over a decade, instrumental variable evidence from Bangladesh. So, আমি কোথায় বসবো? Mahjabin?
Ma'am, do you need to come over here?
এখান থেকে presentation.
প্রেজেন্টার ভিউটা দিয়ে দিলেন প্রেজেন্টার ভিউটা দিয়ে দিলেন
You want to the previous view?
No, slide show করেন এটা হ্যাঁ এক্স্যাক্টলি এটা একটু ছোট করে দিন আচ্ছা এখানে কার্সার কাজ করছে না মানে কাজ করলে হয় I think আচ্ছা মাউস দিয়ে করতে হবে ছোট করে জিনিসটা এটা করে এটা বড় করে এটা এই চোখে কাজ হচ্ছে না এটা কাজ করছে না মানে আমার কি মাউস ইউজ করতে হবে তাহলে
Oh, you can discuss already a PDF. So now it's a present. PPT presenter with yeah. So, am I audible? Yeah. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for allowing me to present my paper titled The Changing Causal Impact of Maternal Employment on Child Nutrition Over a Decade at the 9th SIDE 2026. And I am Mahjabin Mahbub, economics graduate from the Department of Economics, University of Dhaka. And my co-author is SM Imtiaz Mahmoud Momo, consultant at the Swiss Contact Bangladesh. And let me begin with the background. Child undernutrition remains a major development challenge in Bangladesh. At the same time, women's labor force participation has risen over time. Maternal employment can improve child outcomes through higher household income, but it can also worsen them by reducing time for feeding, care, and health supervision. So it's not only about whether maternal employment affects child nutrition, but whether that causal relationship has changed over time in Bangladesh. Now here is the core puzzle of our paper. We can see that between 2014 and 2022, child undernutrition declined while the maternal employment increased over the years. And here we also see the income time trade-off of the mothers. Maternal work may improve nutrition through the income channel or may harm it through time constraints. So the core puzzle is if child nutrition improved while maternal employment also expanded, did the causal effect of maternal employment on child nutrition weaken, persist, or changed over time? Now, very briefly, the previous literature shows mixed evidence. Hossein et al., Andrade and Gale, Rashad and Sharaf, Zakaria et al. Found adverse effect of maternal employment on child nutrition in South Asia, Ecuador, Egypt, and Bangladesh. Finn and Rowe, Hawkins et al., Chaudhary et al., Rollins et al. Suggest that maternal employment may shorten breastfeeding duration and reduce feeding frequency when workplace support and childcare are limited. And some gaps remain. Those are most studies examine this issue at one point in time. Many do not address endogeneity adequately, so the causal interpretation remains weak, and much of the literature relies on binary malnutrition indicators, which miss variation in child growth. Now, this study moves beyond earlier single-period evidence by comparing two nationally representative survey waves to examine whether the effect has changed over time in Bangladesh. This study strengthens the interpretation by addressing endogeneity. This study focuses on continuous anthropometric indicators, and this captures more subtle variation in child growth. This paper contributes updated policy-relevant evidence on how expanding women's economic participation interacts with child nutrition in a rapidly changing Bangladesh. Moving on to the methodology section. And this study uses data from the Bangladesh Demographic and Health Survey, BDHS, of 2014 and 2022, which are two nationally representative survey waves for Bangladesh, and it follows a repeated cross-sectional design. And the sample includes children aged 0 to 59 months living with interviewed mothers with valid anthropometric measures and complete covariates. And the final sample size of our study was 10,898. For the outcome measures, we have taken height for age Z-score, weight for age Z-score, and weight for height Z-scores. These are standard WHO anthropometric measures. More negative Z-scores mean poorer nutritional status. We analyzed each outcome separately. For the key explanatory variable, we have taken maternal employment in the past 12 months. It's a binary indicator. And for controls, we have taken child, mother, and household characteristics like child's age, group, sex, birth order, mother's age category, education level, household wealth quantile, urban-rural residents, number of eligible women in the household, number of under 5 children in the household, and we have also taken division fixed effect into account.
Now comes the analytical model part, and simple correlation may be misleading between maternal employment and child nutritional outcome, as maternal employment is actually endogenous, meaning a mother's decision to work is influenced by other factors such as her child's health, unobserved household constraints, preferences, or motivation, so which also can affect child nutrition. So to address endogeneity, we used an instrumental variable, premarital work, which is whether the mother worked before marriage. And for that, we have taken IV2SLS model as our model one. And here you can see the specification of model one. And we ran this model separately for each wave, 2014 and 2022 for each outcome. We have also taken pooled IV2SLS model with interaction terms as our model 2 to examine whether the employment nutrition relationship changed from 2014 to 2022. In the IV specification, both the employment variable and the interaction term are instrumented with the premarital work indicator and its interaction with the wave indicator. Now the identification logic of the instrumental variable or the IV was premarital work affects child nutrition only through maternal employment, and premarital work is more credible because it predates marriage and childbearing and captures long-run labor market attachment. Women who worked before marriage are substantially more likely to work later during childbearing years. And for the test and support, we have considered first stage coefficients on the IV, and those were significant for both of the ways. So we can say that premarital work strongly predicts later maternal employment. Weak instrument diagnostics such as Kleberg PAP, Craig Donan, Stock Hyogo, Derpico, Hausman, Anderson Rubin tests results are also well above conventional thresholds. Now, here is the IV diagnostic test results. This evidence support our instrumental validity. And moving on to the key result and discussion part. And here are the main results as shown in the table. In 2014, maternal employment was significantly associated with lower HSZ and WSZ. WHZ was not statistically significant. In 2022, coefficients remained negative for all three outcomes, and WSZ was weakly statistically significant. And in the pooled IV model, the 2022 interaction terms were positive and significant for HSZ and WSZ. For WHZ, neither the mean coefficient nor the interaction term was statistically significant. And here we also can see a clear control pattern. Older child age is associated with lower HSZ and WSZ, while maternal education and household wealth are associated with better nutritional outcomes. Here is the second stage regression results of model 1. As we have time constraint, I'm moving on first. And here is the second stage regression result of model 2. Now, this visual summary, the forest plot, makes the pattern even easier to see. As we can see that all IV point estimates are negative in both 2014 and 2022. In 2014, the confidence interval for HSZ and WSL lie fully below 0, showing a clear adverse effect. And in 2022, the estimates remain negative, but the confidence interval for HSZ and WHZ cross 0. And only WSZ is barely significant at the 10% level. Overall, it supports the paper's main conclusion that the penalty weakened over time, though it did not disappear, and it remains most visible for the weight-related outcomes. We also checked robustness in two ways. We re-estimated the IV models, restricting the sample to children aged 6 to 23 months. We further re-estimated the IV models using current maternal employment as our endogenous treatment. And from the table shown here, we can see that signs and approximate magnitude remains similar, especially in 2014. 2022 remains negative but imprecise, and WSZ also showed a similar overall pattern in robust robustness check. And the robustness check overall confirms that the causal effect of maternal employment on child growth remains robust in 2014 with weaker but still negative effects in 2022. Now, I'd like to briefly discuss how we can interpret these findings. In 2014, the stronger negative effect is consistent with an income time trade off, where income gains may not have fully offset the loss of caregiving time. By 2022, the penalty actually became smaller, and the pooled IV model results suggest that the relationship between maternal employment and child nutrition had improved over time rather than remaining fixed. These results should not be read as an argument against women's work, as we have seen that despite the percentage of working mother increasing by 2022, the penalty actually became smaller. And we have also seen that child nutrition improvement is significantly associated with mothers being more educated and wealthier households. Taken together, these patterns are consistent with the idea of a shift toward better supported maternal employment. And this may also reflect a shift from survival-driven, highly constrained work toward better quality or more manageable forms of female employment, together with greater household adaptation and improved health and social support system. Lastly, the 2022 pattern may partly reflect post-COVID recovery with better support for families and improved health and nutrition services. Now, the policy lesson is not to reduce women's work, but to reduce the childcare penalty of work. And we can do that by strengthening women's education and shifting from survival-driven, highly constrained employment to safer and more flexible, better protected work. Strengthening nutrition awareness and feeding counseling for mothers, especially during the early childhood and complementary feeding period. Lastly, scalable protection during economic and public health shock is very important to ensure that short-term crises do not lead to long-term nutritional losses. And this study also has important limitations and future research implications. This study used a repeated cross-sectional design, not the panel data or not the same children or household over time. BDA just lacks detailed data on job quality, childcare, and time use. So the exact mechanism behind this estimated effect cannot be tested directly. So the future research should link nutrition data with labor conditions, childcare access, and time allocation. Further research should also pay closer attention to the 6 to 23-month age group. Lastly, I just want to say that the way forward is to support both women's economic participation and children's nutritional well-being together. Thank you very much, everyone, for patiently listening.
Thank you, Marjorie. I must say that it is a very important discussion because we should not only consider about the individual aspect as well, but there is a household level aspect as well when we are talking about any employment. And it's important to look into different aspects and to look at the other side of the coin as well. So from that point of view, it was an interesting paper, and the way you have applied some quantitative tools as well as a master's student, that's very impressive as well. So now I think we can go back to the paper of Ms. Shomi. Are you ready for that?
Ma'am, do you want to ask her if she would like to try again to present her paper?
Ms. Shomi, would you mind to try once again to see whether you can share your screen?
Yes, ma'am, I'm trying.
If you can, then we can do it from this side.
Okay.
It's working now.
It's working now?
Yes, yes. We
Okay,
can see.
Just a moment. Just a moment.
Did I share? It's not working from her end.
You try from here. You can ask her to stop.
You have to close that one.
Her screen can. Yes, we can see her screen.
We can see your screen.
Okay,
So,
okay.
I think you can carry on.
Okay, ma'am. Okay. Just
Thank you.
share the full screen here. Okay. Hello, everyone. First of all, I'm very sorry for the inconvenience, which is very ironical, I would say, because my paper itself is focused on use of internet. So, okay. So the paper I'm presenting is titled Digital Age, Effect of Internet on Women-Owned Small Businesses. Here, this is a component of my ongoing PhD thesis. This is co-authored with my supervisor, Dr. Shreya Biswas. This will be very much the flow of my presentation from introduction to theoretical framework and onwards. Okay, so let me begin with a simple observation here. More than a quarter of small and medium enterprises in the world are now owned by women. So we see women are increasingly entering entrepreneurship across the world. In fact, if we take around 4 enterprises randomly, more than a quarter means at least one of them is likely to be owned or run by a woman herself. However, in a country like India, where small enterprises play a crucial role in employment and livelihoods, this stream becomes very important. But we can also see, we have seen in the literature that despite the growth despite the growth in entry of female-owned enterprises, the outcomes might not be comparable or comparable with those enterprises that are owned by men. Here, this is taken from the data has been taken from ASUS. This is from ASUS 2023 that I have drawn this comparison that male-owned firms and female-owned firms in terms of gross value added and GVA per worker. It means the output and productivity. So, despite the growing presence, here we can see women-owned enterprises continue to have lower outcomes, and this might be because of a lot of constraints, such as like mobility constraint. They do not have that much of accessibility to have the credit or loan. uh, Constraint in knowledge, lack of knowledge, educational background and literacy, and so on. And last but not the least, societal norms, gender norms, domestic chores, which varies from a woman entrepreneur to a male one. Here, across the world, now policymakers are like they are trying to make the scenario better for women, given the growth in the entrepreneurship. And internet, so meanwhile, has turned out to be a major tool in empowering women in labor market participation across the world. So these are some of the newspaper reports. Like over last 10 years, I would say the media narrative has been very much optimistic about how women are using internet and women are making their names or making benefit out of it professionally. So these are some of the newspaper reports that the incidents have occurred across the states in India itself. But I would say these are random anecdotes. Whether there is a systematic relationship or systematic impact of internet on women-owned enterprises is still underexplored, or we do not have adequate evidence of it. On that note, our research question is: can the use of internet improve the performance of women-owned small enterprises in India? Now, why India? India is an interesting test bed of this analysis because, being one of the has developing countries, it has seen explicit growth in female-led enterprises across last decade. On the other hand, there is a rapid digital penetration in the past decade. Like in 2014, where the number of total subscribers in our country were around 251 million, it in 2024, after 10 years, it has now become around 954 million, which is almost to 80% of growth. And if when it comes to female-led enterprises, female-led small businesses, I would say around 22% in the unorganized sector are now run by women. So for these two reasons, we have taken India as the our study. So let me come to the theoretical framework. So internet, mainly how it impacts the enterprises outcomes, how it might impact is by accessing getting better access to information by lowering information asymmetry. Now lowering information asymmetry, increasing the transparency, it might work in three ways. Firstly, it would lower the credit constraint. How? When women have access to internet, they are now more aware about the options of taking loans. They are now aware about the information about how to take loans and what are the benefit of it and what are the options. So this might lower their credit constraints. Secondly, better access to market. In when we have the internet, a business can grow virtually. When if I'm selling a product, or if I'm making a product, if I get it into Amazon or Flipkart or something like that, I am now able to reach a distant market, and I am now able to know the demand of the customers and about the information of raw materials, which might benefit my enterprise outcome as well. Thirdly, lower information asymmetry. Reduction in information asymmetry might lower the transaction cost. Given the mobility constraint, it might always not be possible for women to go for and sell their products or get the payment, which gets us to the transaction cost channel, which is if we are able to do it digitally. Now we all have the digital payment option, online payment option. This would lower the transaction cost for women in particular, and all this channel would lead to better output or productivity and also employment. But when it comes to employment, literature has suggested, or literature has shown that internet might impact the employment in two ways. Firstly, it might be a labor augmenting technology or labor substituting technology. In that case, the effect is ambiguous. But so far, I have been talking about how access of internet can be beneficial for women-owned enterprises, but only access will not do the whole thing. If I have a smartphone, but I do not know how to use it, it will not benefit me in any way possible. So that brings us to the second order digital divide, which mainly focuses on how the women are, or how the people are using internet even after accessing it. So if I'm giving access to all of them, but there is a differential gap in the use of it based on digital literacy gap or educational gap, the effect might not be similar even across all the women. So we have used the data from annual survey of unincorporated sector enterprises of ASUS. We have taken the data of 3 rounds starting from 2021 to 24. ASUS gives the enterprise level data about the enterprise owners and also enterprise characteristics. We have limited our sample to only women-owned enterprises. Sample size is around 280,000, a little more than that. This is the distribution of it. As we can see here, even across the years, the number of women-owned enterprises have only increased from starting from about 80,000 to now 1 lakh. So the variables I have used here, I have segmented the variables in outcome variables in 3 ways in terms of output, productivity, and employment. Output variable here is gross value added. I have taken the logarithm of gross value added in rupees. For productivity, I have taken GVA per worker, which is the log of GVA by number of workers. And I have taken whether the firm is own account enterprise or it is hiring workers. In that case, I have taken the binary variable here, which assigns 1 if the enterprise has hired workers and 0 for own account enterprises. And lastly, we have also taken total workers, which is log of the number of workers currently working in an enterprise owned by a woman. And our interest variable is whether the firm is using internet or not. If the enterprise is using the internet, we have assigned 1 and otherwise 0. So this is the baseline equation where YIJST is the outcome of ith firm in jth industry in the state is and in time t. So here our interest of interest value.
Shomi, Miss Shomi, sorry for interrupting, but I think is it possible for you to make it a bit short because you actually don't have much time left. Thank you.
I'm so sorry, ma'am. I'm trying. Okay, so the coefficient of interest is the internet one. We have taken the we have control for age, education, social group of the enterprise, and also for industries, and round is the year variable here. And because of the endogeneity issues, because we do not know whether the firm is already flourishing or based on the growth or motivation of the enterprise owner, they might be more inclined to using internet, so there might be some reverse causality there. So we have taken instrumental variable approach, and our instrument is female share of internet use at the district level, which we have collected from National Female Family Health Survey, NFHS 5 2019 to 21. So this is the summary statistics. As you can see that firms, women-owned firms which are using internet, they are very less in number in comparison to the firms which are not using internet. But in terms of outcomes, like GVA per worker, hiring workers, everything, they have better result than the firms which are not using internet. Coming to OLS, we have found significant result for all our outcome variables. If a firm is using internet, they are having better and significant outcomes in terms of GVA per worker, hiring workers, and also total workers. But when I'm controlling with, when I'm introducing my instrument in the specification, so here the result is similar to the OLS one, but we do not find significant evidence for the employment factor, which is the total workers. We have also
I think here, if you can just go to the conclusion, because the quantitative aspect, I think the discussion will give you some inputs on that.
Okay,
we're running out of time.
Okay, ma'am. I'm supposed to skip all of it. So, okay, so the key takeaways here is that internet helps improve business outcomes for small business owners. Mechanism, which I was not here, you can see the mechanism I have running for market constraint, credit constraint, accounts maintained, whether the firm is maintaining any account, and registration, whether the firm is registered with any authority. We have seen or we have found that for internet is reducing market and credit constraints significantly, and they are more they are pushing the firms more to maintaining accounts and for registering with authority, which indicates towards formalization tenacity. So the key takeaways, as I said, it helps improve business outcomes. Mechanism, more access to information leads to better access to market and credit better access to market and credit channel, and also their tenacity to formalize rises. And the effect, as I was not able to explain, it varies across the sectors, like manufacturing versus non-manufacturing sector, high education level and low education level. If the owner is having a higher education level, the likelihood to use internet for your enterprise rises. And caste, we have found an interesting result here. The owners hailing from SC and ST background, they are having better or like comparatively higher outcomes than the ones hailing from unreserved categories and OBC categories. So the policy implication goes like expanding affordable and reliable internet access for women-owned small enterprises because education has a positive correlation with the use of internet and for enterprises. We suggest complementary policies related to women's education and designing policies to address second order digital divide, as I have already explained, because access will not do the whole thing. Use how to use it matters as well. And also complementary policies to bridge the caste gap in internet penetration, because internet might be a factor that can positively influence the caste gap in reduction the caste gap, as we have seen that SC/ST owners are having higher outcomes. So this is very much it from my end. I'm very sorry for the.
Thank you, Ms. Shomi. I think just like India, in Bangladesh as well, the importance of women-led small and medium enterprises that has been increasing over time, and we are often considering this as one of the very fundamental aspects of women's economic empowerment. Now we have heard all four papers, so now we have a distinguished discussant, and we have with us Dr. Ishrat Jahan Khan, who is Associate Professor, Department of Women and Gender Studies, University of Dhaka. So she will shed some light on different aspects of four of the papers. So over to you, Dr. Ishrat.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to share this panel with our Honorable Pro-Vice Chancellor. And it was really, am I audible or is it working well? I think most of us here are from Bangladesh, and I can go for bilingual and mixed. It's fine, I guess. First of all, when I was listening to the presentations, definitely these are from the Global South experiences, as I can hear. It was quite common that the issue of gender, although very important, but it often goes unrecognized. So I can see from the presentations, most of you are economists and you are bringing the quantitative data, but also you are trying to shed lights on the feminist interpretation, which is really, really worth mentioning. And I first want to give you a round of applause. When we teach gender or when we discuss about the feminist issues, we always say that I don't want to hurt anyone. The conventional economists usually try to overlook this side, like what happens behind the screen. So when I was doing my research, like how do the professional women in Dhaka's middle class, how do they negotiate their economic empowerment or the agency practices in their private lives? So I saw a lot of, I heard a lot of stories and narratives from young women, rural women, urban women, and how they were negotiating. So although these research actually bring the quantitative data, but they also talk about this side or this difficult side, which we heard it talk about. So I usually try to call it or put it like the hardly told narratives, or widely experienced but hardly told. So one thing that is very common from these presentations, if I go to the literature, we can see that since 1990s, there is a huge increase in the female labor force participation, if I speak about Bangladesh. But we usually celebrate this number that a lot of women are coming to the economic world or in the public spaces. But do we really hear what happens to them when they go back to their families? How do they negotiate their agencies? Do they have control over their own earning, their income? Do they have control over that, their income, consumption, whatever it is? And also, are they falling victims of violence? So I would like to start with the second presenter, where Adnan Fakir, I guess. He was actually trying to talk about the fear of violence, or and how it is related to women's subjective experience. So that was very important. Although this is a quantitative research, as I can see, the researcher was actually trying to look at the changing causal impact. Oh, I'm sorry, not this one. Let me just wait behind. The impact of media coverage of sexual violence on working women's decisions. It is about the rural women in Bangladesh, but this actually gives us a clear-cut idea that although a lot of women are trying or deciding to come out of their families, they are trying to be mobile, they really want to be economically independent. But if you have observed the statistics for each one case or incident of the violence, I mean, the ratio is like 1:3.8 or 4.3 something percentage. So for each single case of violence, like 3 to 4 or maybe more than that, women are actually deciding not to come out. Or even the researcher focused that some women actually they planned or switched their jobs. They were like full-time working women, but now they are trying to think about for a part-time position, or like he suggested like self-employment to work without pay. So this is not a very good news for us. So as Bangladesh, when we are thinking about the policies, or if we look at the 5-year plans or our national women's action plans or the plans for the women's development, Bangladesh has gone far, actually. But if you look at the statistics, or if you look at the, how can I say, the newspaper, as a country, especially in South Asia, Bangladesh tops the South Asian ladder board. What does that mean? That means we are doing great in ensuring or promoting women's economic empowerment. But is empowerment about only giving women the chance or opportunity to get jobs? No. So there are politics of shame, there are politics of representation. Also, I would like to say there are vertical and horizontal segregation within the markets. So I guess the first or second researcher actually tried to shed light on like when a man actually gets 9,500 taka per month, a woman is getting like 500 or 600 taka per month. So that's a huge difference. So of course, these are very important that women should come out of their families and they should be mobile and they should play a role in decision making. But we need to also understand what are the problems behind. So if I come to the first presenter, she was also trying to find the stressors which are causing or which are happening at the private sphere, or at the families within marriage as an institution. So it's kind of very important to understand, like, although we give opportunities for women, but because of the policy lacking, or because of I would say we are not yet able to create an enabling environment for women within the institutions. So the government is saying like women should come to the offices more. But you see, like when women are joining the workforce, especially your article, right? That is about the maternal, what do you call it?
Maternal employment.
Yes, maternal employment and the nutritional
Child nutritional
trade, right? So when we welcome women to the workforce, so especially for the under 5 children, what we see, like women are being blamed. Like I have an experience. One of my students were actually, she was working with me. This research actually brought the data, the quantitative data, and she tried to look at the qualitative data and the narratives of women from, as far as I remember, I think from the Chandpur district. I just want to quote, because I was a supervisor, I think I can share that. So some women are really, really blamed for their employment or their career. And they were telling her, একটু নিজের দিকে তাকাও দেখো, please do not feel offended. That was the quotation. একটু নিজের দিকে তাকাও, দেখে মনে হচ্ছে বাসার সব খাবার বোধহয় তুমি খেয়ে ফেলছো, আর বাচ্চাটা তো একটু গ্রোথ হচ্ছে না. So these are really derogatory comments. Like, because the mother is working outside, she is being a victim of psychological, physical, emotional violence and whatnot. So when she goes to the office or when she goes to work, she's being questioned. Who is going to take care of your children? Who is going to breastfeed? Who is going to ensure the nutrition of the child? When she comes back, or when she goes to the office, everyone says, okay, a lot of women like you are working. If they can manage, you can manage as well. But what is lacking here? The lacking is the policy and also the interventions. If you are not giving women the creche or the childcare facilities in the offices, how come you expect that women will continue? So when we look at this research or when we look at this data, we see that there is a lack of policy implications. Although we have some policies, but also as usual, there is a lack of implementation, which is very important. And that's why the numbers increasing doesn't mean that women are becoming empowered. Then again, if I want to talk about the theoretical framework or the part of the research, in most of the cases, I can remember that Nabila, I guess, yeah, she was working on Shen's capability approach. Nowadays, it's definitely, this is very worth mentioning contribution of Shen. I would also like to suggest, or if you have the chance, you can also look at Naila Kabir's theory on women's empowerment, because it's about resource, agency, and the achievement of women. It's a package. So we need to understand like how, when women get the resources, especially the financial resources, how these are converted or translated into their agency practices and the decision making in the household. Recently, I was working on a paper. So I was looking at the statistics, and there is a very interesting fact. If you have the chance to see, you can go through the Akhtar and Tan's literature. So they are trying to show that now, because women are becoming empowered and they are economically independent, there is the rivalry and the marital conflict is rising, increasing at an increasing rate. If I say, put it like the economists, views. So why is this happening? That is very important. That it was supposed to be the other way around, no? So in general, I was reading some literature. When we look at the European or the American or the global North context, it says, or the literature say that when the spouse or the couples or the intimate partners have less differences in economic terms, they have better intimate relations or better marital relations. Why? Because they do not need to, take care of others' needs and accessories, etc. But it happens the other way around in the global south, particularly in Bangladesh. Why? I think it is because when women becomes independent, there is a problem with the dominant division of labor and the patriarchal construction of who does what, right? So this role constraint and the role stress, when we try to look at it, we usually don't talk about it. And this becomes so phenomenal that sometimes women also consider it like, oh yeah, this is my job. Actually, I need to do it. Or because I'm a mother, I always will go through the guilt trip that, oh yeah, it is because of me, my child is not becoming healthy. But is it only because of the mother's employment? I know many mothers, I don't want to disrespect others, but I know many mothers who do not work outside, but their children are not very healthy. There might be some other genetical issues, there might be some other lack of awareness, etc. But why do we generalize these things? Because society has, the patriarchal society mainly has a tendency to blame women for everything. It is about care work, which goes unpaid. It is about the vertical and the horizontal segregation at office, which also goes unrecognized. It is about the structural violence that also often goes ignored. So we try to underestimate women, but we expect them to be a superwoman. That is the problem. We want them to be empowered, but we do not want them to bargain or negotiate for their rights. We want them to be educated, not but competent. If you also remember, when I was reading or writing, I actually should. Do I have time, or like should I need to limit?
No, I think it's okay.
Okay.
I think you can carry on for another 5 minutes.
Yeah. All right. All right. So, when we were, I was reading some literature from, our historical past. I mean, historical past means the colonial times. So when the British came, we know that at that time, not many of our women were, employed, right? But the educated middle class men always wanted to get married to a very, educated middle class woman. Why? Do you have any idea why? Because they needed an enlightened or someone who they can carry or who they can take with them to the parties or somewhere they can speak. But they actually didn't want the empowered women. They just wanted the enlightened women. So I guess we have that tendency in our blood. So the rising middle class or the rural class where women are now becoming empowered, all the men actually want women. Okay, this is a status quo. Like I really want my wife or partner to be empowered, not empowered like, employed. I can tell people that, yeah, my partner is working here and there, blah, blah, blah. But when it's about the family and marriage, you definitely need to confine with the traditional ideologies of middle class or, the South Asian femininity, right? So here is the problem. So when we actually work on the policies, when we try to implement the policies, it's in our head. So all those men or even women, those are implementing, those are, executing or implementing or deciding the policies. They are not beyond that block. So when we plan, lots of good things we can see, but in general, I don't think everyone wants women to be that strong or bargaining with that bargaining capacity. I can see some smiles. People are laughing. Maybe you can relate. All right. So yeah. So this is very important to bring this topic in front of or in these forums so we can discuss about it. And also another thing I really liked about these presentations that they also try to cover several institutions, whether it's family, it's marriage, it's media. So the issue of violence or the discrimination that women face actually happens everywhere. So even though the numbers are talking, what I would like to hear, or maybe if you have the chance, I would also want you to hear the narratives of the women, because statistics is very important. I know you all, maybe most of you are from the economics background, but when we want to interpret it from a feminist perspective, I think it's also very important to get the accounts from the women of different social classes, especially when we are generalizing. Say, for example, this is the case of Bangladesh, or this is the case of India, like when Shomi was explaining, the cases of digital entrepreneurs, I guess, from India. So I think it varies from which part of India you are considering. And also it varies from women's socioeconomic statuses. Also, she mentioned that the caste people that are women from different social castes, they have different experiences. But when you actually try to access the online platforms, your digital literacy, your access to those platforms, and also the credits, and also what you probably forgot to look at, or maybe if you have the chance to look at, how these women actually fall victims of cyber violence or online violence. So from my perspective, when I see lots of my friends or, my colleagues or friends who are small, medium, involved with the small and medium enterprises, particularly like those have online business, that is really disgusting. Like when they show their products or when they are actually promoting their products, lots of derogatory comments are made in the comment section. And this is so, I don't know how to put it, like unfortunate. That would be very simple to put it. But this is really, this is something we need to address. Like we are giving the platforms for women, but we are actually not trying to understand the probable risks associated with this. So as a result, many of my friends or colleagues who started their online businesses a couple of years ago are now slowly closing down. Why? Because it's very difficult for them to survive in the male-dominated industry. When you need to, especially someone at, I think, I'm really very bad at names. I can't remember the names. The second presenter from Sussex, I guess. He was trying to show like women who covers head have different experiences or not. So it actually also depends on the patriarchal social constructs, no? Like the background, I mean, your social background, your economic background, how you access those platforms, how from where you get the trainings. So these things are very important, although the numbers cannot connect to that, but sometimes it's better to bring the narratives or the stories of women from those particular contexts, so you can actually get the real stories. So I think these are the main areas that I wanted to cover. And of course, most of you have covered the invisible labor, the unpaid domestic labor of women. Although feminists really want this care work or this household works to be, valued, but I think we are far way behind that because first of all, we need to ensure that women have an enabling environment in the public spaces so that they can at least continue their jobs. And we really don't want them to lose their jobs or to drop out from those areas. So that's all from me. Thank you very much. And I really thank the four presenters for bringing these very contemporary and useful data from different contexts. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Isha, for such a detailed comment. So I'm just wondering, are we taking any question from the audience, or are we just closing it? If there is one or two questions, then okay.
Assalamualaikum. I'm Imtiaz, graduate student from the Department of Economics, University of Dhaka. So my question is to Ms. Nabila Hassan. As your paper claims, female labor force participation is the mediating channel, but how do you establish mediation rather than simultaneity? Given that empowerment itself may increase women's labor force participation. So in other words, I can say, why is FLFP the mechanism, not an outcome of empowerment? Thank you.
We can take questions.
Thank you. I am Isha Hussain working at Sanem. I have two questions. First question is for Ms. Nabila Hassan. So in your paper, have you considered that climate stress can promote less women education and result in more women at young age marrying off? Have you considered this issue while you were saying that that climate impact is more on the working woman and less on the women who are at home? Can you repeat? Yeah. So my question is, have you considered that climate stress can promote less women education and resulting more women at young age marrying off? So the purpose of my question is, you have said that climate stress impact more to the working woman, less to the household woman. And I have a comment for Ms. Mazabin Mabu, and actually it's comment for all. So for the changing maternal employment impact on child nutrition paper, I'm just saying this comment as it has been concluded in this paper that the cost of maternal employment should be reduced. Why the corporations or the workplaces will do that? Have we considered it? Because in one side we can have the argument of justice or the just society. On the other hand, the corporations will always estimate their profit. So can be present that if they reduce the cost of paternal employment, that will help their organization or corporation to get more profit. Thank you.
One last question.
This is Imam Hassan. I'm from Institute of Health Economics, University of Dhaka. My question is to Dr. Adnan M.S. Bakir. If we consider the variable education or age, can we see any difference in the matter that he's trying to show the impact of media coverage on sexual violence on women's work decision? Like if we consider like education, like more educated women or less educated women. Also, if we consider the age, like younger women or older women, do we see any difference between in their behavior? And my one extra question to Ms. Nabila Hassan. Does the data set capture informal employment as well? Like in Bangladesh, a great portion of women works in waste management, also in brick management. So does the data set capture this informal employment, which is very common in Bangladesh? Thank you.
Yeah, so thank you everyone for really interesting and intriguing question. So I would like to come to the first question telling that. So in my second specification, I include the female labor force participation as the explanatory variable. So it is positive. So if you are empowered, the woman is empowered, it's positively associated with female labor force participation. But why I'm using it as a mediating factor or like why I'm calling it as a heterogeneous effect, because I am getting that climate stress and women economic empowerment is positively related. But if I check through this mediation effect of female labor force participation, I can see whether this works for non-working women or working women. So the main thing is if your stress, like climate stress, increases your work burden for an employed woman or a working woman, that's a bad thing, because I'm getting that it increases the burden for non-working women. So is it clear or not? But I would like to get you to further when we discuss later on. And it's very initial analysis, so I might get some interesting figures afterwards. So I think getting back to Ishrat's question, so I worked on this question in my second chapter of the thesis, because what I get is if a household, let's say a rural household, is faced with climate stress, they take out the child or the female child who is not of age, like less than 18 years old, and marry her off as a coping mechanism to kind of as a coping mechanism to that shock they faced, the household faced. And it came as significantly kind of around 12% or 13% increase in child marriage due to climate stress happened in a lag year, like a year before to the household. And actually, my current work is a continuation of that work, because I was looking at two kind of the elder, the smaller females or like that aspect. But what happens if the women who are getting married in the first round? So that's another specification. So what happens if the women are married off, and whether they are not in work or not in work, and how that effect kind of translates into the women empowerment. I think I have answered that. And the last question, I would say, yes, the BHS data captures, but for my analysis, I'm not using that aspect of informal work. So I'm focusing on the unpaid female labor work, like unpaid family labor. Yeah. Thank you so much.
This one question for you.
So I forgot your name. Sorry.
Isha.
Ishrat. Okay. So Ishrat Apu asked me a valid question, and that actually came to my mind as well. And I think if we can provide incentives from the government, government should introduce incentives to help the mothers, working mothers, so that the corporate what do I say? The corporate workplace. The corporate workplace should incorporate the child care centers, maybe the daycare centers. They should introduce that, and it can be done by changing their mindsets, and if they get any government incentives, because as you say that they are very profit seeking, they have the very profit seeking mentality. So yes, this is a very valid concern, and as usual it depends on the mentality, and government should look into it, I think.
Thank you. There was one question for Dr. Fakir. So can you hear us?
Yes, thank you. Thank you for the question. Yes, we do find heterogeneity by age. Ages 25 to 35 were most susceptible to being affected by this. Surprisingly, we do not see a difference by education, but we suspect that that's likely being driven by the fact that majority of the sample in rural Bangladesh, at least the ones from BIHS, are not that educated. So about 33% does not have any education, about 37% have primary education, or at least up to primary education. So that might be driving that lack of heterogeneity in terms of education. And also, thank you to the discussant. Just wanted to let you know that Sohail Nazneen and Naomi Hussain from SOAS, they're actually working on a qualitative version of exactly this paper. So, but that'll be a separate paper by itself. Yeah.
Thank you. So I think we are at the end of this session, and the clock is in front of me, so I should not speak a lot. First of all, let me congratulate the paper presenters because I would like to genuinely thank them, because when we talk about gender and economics, we often there was a viewpoint that these issues are basically qualitative, and there were not a lot of work on quantitative aspects. But it's good that a lot of quantitative work is also carried out on this aspect, and these are important because I think nowadays, when we are talking about economics on one hand, but at the same time we are also considering different aspects of gender, both quantitative and qualitative aspects should work hand in hand, because this sort of issues should be dealt as a mixed method approach. And from that point of view, from quantitative point of view, all four of the papers have applied sophisticated methods, and the discussion has covered several aspects. For me, if anyone want to talk, then we can talk one-to-one, because it will take quite a long time if you want to focus on each of the papers. And my area of work, as you know, that is basically female labor market. So from my experience, I wanted to share 2-3 things. One important thing, I think that what should we do now? Because when at the end of conference, people generally don't carry forward the work. But it's very important that this work is not stopped here. So there are researchers who are working on PhD thesis. For them, that's different, but otherwise, it's very important that this work get published in peer-reviewed journals, so that from this conference and from the feedback and from the stimulating discussion, some concrete research work is done. So that is one thing. And the second thing is, my own experience says that the research becomes meaningful when it gets implemented. So that is a realization that I have, and I think it's important that you can actually, from each of the sessions, you can actually jot down some of the key recommendations. And with that recommendation, if you can communicate this recommendation with the policymakers, and even if you can implement, even if one of these recommendations, that is a great success of this session. So that is something that you should actually try. So it's important to have research, but it's more important to get it done, get the work done. So that's the general point. But because from my work experience, one thing I would like to stress is that when we are talking about women's labor market, it's the work is, I think all four of the paper is to some extent related to women's work. So when we are talking about women's work, there are some structural issues, there are some policy issues, there are some gender restrictive norms as well. So for policy point of view, there can be some very specific policies. For example, we have been talking about women's unaccounted work and domestic care work, and there can be some very specific policy issues related to that. There are issues related to small and medium enterprises, and we have been researchers have been working on that for quite a long time. And there's a sort of an agreement that when we are talking about, at this stage, when we are talking about different countries like Bangladesh, India, Nepal, for these countries, like SME or CSME is one of the very fundamental ways to explore, to stimulate the rural economy, to boost women empowerment. So what are the challenges there? So one of the challenges is related to lack of credit. Another thing is, for the female, it's very important that there is less connection to the mainstream supply chain. So the networking and to linking them to the mainstream supply chain and to providing them information. Often they don't have the access to information. So these are some of the policy issues that can be done, and that can actually have a very important impact when we are talking about the overall CSME scales. And when we are talking about, these are some policy aspects, but when we are talking, and of course, when we are talking about the policy, there are issues like the training. But the training, often we find the training is not linked with the employment. So if the training is not linked with the employment, the woman, she is actually taking the training, but if she cannot translate it to the to employment, that training is often, I will not say wasted, but it's not getting its true potential. So these are some of the policy things, how to link it. But there are also issues which is more gender restrictive norms. As we have, and we all have done some work on women labor market, and there are issues which is like which needs qualitative assessment. And once when we are looking at this, that this gender restrictive norm and how that changing, I think one of the very important issue is the changes should start from home. So it's important to treat the girl child and the boy child equally, and to have mutual respect for each other. So that is very important question that came from the audience, like what happens when if there is a climate change when that has an effect on a girl child in particular. So these are the one issue, but I think we also need to focus on one thing, that when we are talking about employment, we should not think about it as a quantitative thing, because there's a quality dimension on that. Because when we look at the women's employment, now we see that it's very much centered on rural agricultural based employment, and 75% of the women, they are actually working in the agricultural sector, which is relatively less skilled, more vulnerable, and some of this work are as an unpaid family work. So that is one issue. And informality, the degree of informality over time has increased for women's work. So that is another surprising thing as well. But more importantly, that interesting thing is, like, I'm talking about this Bangladeshi perspective, I think in the overall South Asian perspective, the papers are from South Asian perspective, are more or less similar, portrays a similar picture. Is like when we look at the decision-making role, when we look at the top management, less than 7% women, they are in the managerial position. So that is a striking feature in the context of Bangladesh. So when we are talking about the decision making, when we are talking about high paid, more skilled work, we see lesser and lesser women. So we actually need to focus where are the challenges, and the policy focus should deal with the removing those challenges and to pave a smooth way to the transition towards women's employment. And from a qualitative perspective, there are a lot of studies have already been done, and a lot of studies is going on, and it's important to combine both quantitative and the qualitative aspect. And the last thing I would like to say is like we also should keep one thing in mind, that some of the aspects, like some of the issues, like when we had COVID, we have seen that there is a gendered impact. So there is we are now talking about LDC graduation. So LDC graduation can have a gendered aspect as well. And there is a concern that when we are talking about LDC graduation, the woman might have been affected more seriously than men because of the skill set and because of the type of work they are doing. So there are also some dynamic aspects that the policy focus should concentrate on. But I would like to end with a positive note. For example, there are also some areas which made us hopeful because we have narrowed down the gap between in the education sector, primary, secondary, not only primary, secondary, but tertiary as well. So the gender gap has narrowed down quite a lot. Although we don't have much women in the STEM-based education, but in many other education, tertiary level, we have seen and we are finding increasing number of women. Even at Dhaka University, like last year, I think there was more than 50% enrollment was a girl student, female student. So that is something that makes us more optimistic. So we want to end this session with an optimistic note, and thanks to the discussant and thanks to the participant. And let me conclude here now. Thank you.